Wherever and however you are watching, welcome to the Gillette AFL Trade Wrap-Up. Coming up, we'll go club by club and find out what your team got and what it lost over what has been a marathon month. To do that, I'm joined by Damien Barrett, and thankfully, Damo, we're going in alphabetical order. The Crows are obviously at the top of the list, and the top story in football right now is the Kurt Tippett situation. It really has turned into a crisis.
Only way to describe it, Matty, is a crisis. And right now, it's just the degrees of crisis for that club and the individuals involved in it. I mean, what was initially a side deal, which was serious enough in itself, has now just morphed into something a whole lot worse for that club and the people involved with it. And the outside salary cap payments are the ones that are going to come down very hard when it comes to AFL findings on this. And people will be losing jobs out of it. There'll be almost certainly loss of draft choices, whether that happens in the 2000 draft or beyond. But almost certainly now the Adelaide Crows get that. And Kurt Tippett can probably expect to be deregistered for a period of 2013 too, I would have thought.
All right, well, that is the story out of the final day of trade talks. The fact that the Crows haven't done that deal with the Sydney Swans, as you can see. Question marks all round. They have gained Angus Graham, though, and of course they lost Chris Knight. But really, Kurt Tippett remains the story. What is going to happen for him now? Is he going to end up at another club?
Yeah, he'll end up at another club, and strangely enough, Sydney Swans may still be the club best equipped to get him. They've still got that first-round draft pick to use, should they choose to use it in the draft. They've certainly got the salary cap room to do it. Not every club does. I wouldn't be ruling out Gold Coast, but whatever's done here, the clubs will have to factor in that he will be missing matches. I would think, as we go to air today, that he'll be missing some matches out of the 2013 season for being part of something that the AFL doesn't like.
So just quickly, how does that sit with the Sydney Swans then? I mean, why would you want to recruit a player who's going to miss a substantial amount of football?
If you're going to give him a 4 or 5 year deal, which they've certainly talked about, certainly 4 years is on the table prior to this week unfolding. 6 matches, if it is 6 matches, 2 matches if it's 2 matches. It's not going to be a full season. You do it for the big picture. And they're the one club out of basically 18 in the whole comp that can get him in and not be tarnished by the bad smell that he's going to bring. If he was to come to a Melbourne club, I don't think he would be able to deal with what is going to be coming his way, because Adelaide Footy Club and supporters of that club are just enraged by what's gone on. And there's ramifications there for the people in charge of that club. Stephen Triggs in all sorts of trouble, as his own manager, Peter Blucher. So those things will play out. The AFL will take its time over it, but I would expect, and I reckon they should be making their sanctions being affected this particular draft for both the club and player.
All right, the AFL will have to move quickly if that is going to be the case. Of course, the important question for you now as we go through club by club is to get your grade, and I'm tipping it's not starting well.
No, it's not. I mean, there's only one way to look at Adelaide, and it's just the F in the old-fashioned school marking system. They could not get anything else. They lost Chris Knight as a free agent and then didn't get anything for Tippett, and will probably lose what they've already got. Pick 20 is probably in jeopardy as we speak. All
right, more on the dramas at Adelaide as it comes to hand. But right now, let's turn our attention to the Brisbane Lions. And as we can see, Brent Maloney and Stephen Martin, 2 Melbourne players, come in from Melbourne to the Lions. They've lost a couple of late picks.
I like what the Lions did, Matt. You look at Maloney and Martin, you think it's not going to do too much, but they targeted Maloney and they felt Martin can add to them. We know Martin at his best is actually okay. Only gave up 53 and 73 for him. Didn't give anything up for Maloney. I like it. I'm going to give them a B+ for what they did in trade period.
All right, your grade?
B+.
B+ for the Brisbane Lions, and of course they've got pick 8 to play with come the draft. All right, to Carlton we turn our attention now. A very quiet trade period for them. Jordan Russell, the only departure.
Almost forgot it was on. I think Carlton had enough to deal with changing coaches and then severing the contracts of 3 assistant coaches, and then boardroom troubles, which seemed to be a perennial problem for them. Didn't get involved, and as such can only be ranked pretty harshly, and I'm going to give them a D for Carlton's effort.
All right, a quiet trade period for the Blues. Let's turn to Collingwood. They have had a really interesting trade period, haven't they, with Quinton Lynch coming in, Clinton Young and Jordan Russell as well. They've lost Chris Dawes and Sharrod Wellingham. That's probably the most talked about one, and Tom Young as well.
Liked what they did and liked it a lot. They've still got those key picks too, 18, 19, 21, and a bit of a flip-flop with North Melbourne to also get 39. That's a beautiful array of selections for someone like Derek Hine. Went out and got Lynch and Young as free agents, added Russell in, even though he was a free agent, added him in late. This is Lynch here. This is why they went and got him, Matt, just to add to the list there. What that meant, and what it meant early on, was that Dawes goes. They're not disappointed in losing Dawes. Don't think for a minute that they're too worried about that. And they didn't want to lose Wellingham, but at least by losing him, they got pick 17, as it was at the time. That's become 18 now because of the Goddard compensation. But I like what they've done, and I reckon they've had a really good month. And someone like Derek Hines has already done well in this period and will now use some really nice draft picks.
Your grade for the Pies?
A+.
A+. That is a big mark. That's going to cause some conversation on Twitter, I reckon, that grade. Let's turn our attention now to the Bombers. They scored the big coup of the trade period, didn't they? The free agency period, landing Brendan Goddard. They've lost Angus Montfries. Of course, Danaher comes with the father-son rule.
Yep.
And then the rest of their picks are a bit later.
You can't judge them on Danaher because that just was a beautiful scenario that they managed to get anyway. This is Goddard playing for St Kilda. It's why they went and got him. And what I really like, Matty, about what they did was they just announced to the footy world within a couple of hours of free agency starting, hey, we've got the big name out there. Everyone else has been trying to get him. We've got him. Here it is by 3 hours after it started. And I think it sort of set the theme for a couple of other clubs, Richmond in particular, to officially announce deals they had done. But until Essendon did this is Danaher on screen now too, and this is why they are so excited, and we're probably lucky to get him with, as it turned out, pick 10.
Why wouldn't you be excited with what Danaher can offer? The way he talks as well, we got to talk to him through the combine period as well. He's just so relaxed and so ready to go with his football. They are absolutely stoked. Your grade?
Yeah, look, lost Angus Montfries, but it's not a big deal to them. A+ and A+ every day for what they did. Went and got the big fish.
All right, let's turn our attention to the Fremantle Dockers. And they, of course, have picked up Daniel Pearce from Port Adelaide, lost Greg Broughton. Now, Broughton, from what we hear, fell out of favour with coach Ross Lyon. Their first pick in the draft will be at 17.
Yeah, big fan of Ross Lyon. Just knew what he wanted to do. It's a surprise to us on the outside, isn't it, that Broughton is now no longer there. But Ross Lyon doesn't get these things wrong, I believe. Here's Pearce here, and this is why they want to add him to what they do, particularly at Subiaco Oval.
Was a winner at the Rising Star a few years back.
Yeah, and Ross Lyon will back himself to make him work, because he hasn't worked at all well for Port Adelaide in the past couple of seasons, maybe even 3 seasons, I would have thought. So they went and got him as the free agent, knew what they were doing, might have paid overs to get him by way of comparison. And
well suited to Subiaco Oval as well, with his pace on the wide expanses there.
And they kept pick 17 in doing what they did. They could still do some damage with that should they choose to do something outside the ordinary in the draft. And I reckon they had a good trade period for as little the work as they did. And I'm going to give them a B.
All right, there you go. At B, I'm loving the stamp. The stamp is working brilliantly. Let's go now to the Cats. They've been more active than they have been in previous years. We've seen them pick up Josh Caddy. That was the big get. Jared Rivers, of course, from Melbourne, and Hamish McIntosh from North. Both of those players fill really specific roles. They've lost Shannon Burns, and their first pick in the draft will be pick 16. They also lost that compo pick, which goes to Gold Coast.
Yeah, it does. I'm ranking them pretty highly here, Matt, simply because they went and got Josh Caddy. There was a massive queue for his services. A lot of clubs liked their chances to get him. They did. There's question marks on the other two, Rivers and McIntosh, but they knew what they were doing and they're prepared to take a risk on both. And I'll just back that system in to get the best out of those two question mark selections. So I judge them really highly on what they've done this period. I'm going to give them an A.
Okay, let's go now to the Gold Coast. We'll be heading up there in a few weeks' time for the draft. Look at what they have done. Jack Martin, the 17-year-old in the mini draft, can't play until 2014, of course. They've got that compo pick that the Cats originally got for Gary Ablett. Lost Caddy and Hickey, of course, but they bring in Broughton from Fremantle and Tom Murphy from Hawthorn, adding some experience to their side. Their first pick in the draft is a bit later than it has been in the past few years at pick number 13.
Yeah, look, they were benefited by having a nice array of selections to deal with. Didn't do a lot. They've still got 13, so they can get involved. They're really happy with getting Jack Martin. So that's what they got out of this year. But as we know, he can't play in 2013. For that simple reason, I think that being the highlight of what they did. And the Broughton's a good pickup. I'm going to give them a C simply because that decision will impact more on 2014 and beyond than next year.
All right, let's turn to Greater Western Sydney. A late trade today, receiving Stephen Gillam from Hawthorn, as you can see. They've lost Jack Hompsch. We've also seen, as it is here, Damo, all about draft picks for GWS. They've got 6 of the first 2 rounds, including 1, 2 and 3. As we roll the tape, we can have a look at a couple of them. Lachie Whitfield, he is the favourite to go at 1.
Yep.
From the Dandenong Stingrays, a medium midfielder. His skills are great, but it's his decision-making and his awareness that certainly gives him the big raps. Also worth mentioning South Australian Jimmy Toumpas. He's another key contender for the top 3, as is another South Aussie from Sturt, a powerful ruckman who provides a strong marking target in Brodie Grundy.
Yeah, it's just whether they want to go down the path of getting a young ruckman on their list. I would suggest they won't on that one, Matt. They'll certainly give it consideration, but I think they'll just continue to load up with midfielders and forwards and backs and then leave the ruckman selection for down the track when they get there. Look, because they had a lot to work with, and a lot of clubs would have loved to have had what they work with, I've just taken a little bit of an edge off what they did. I'm still giving them a B+. I mean, other people might happily give them an A+, but a B+ for me.
All right, you're watching AFL.com.au right across Australia and indeed around the world, and we interrupt our little program here right now, Damo, to bring you some breaking news. The AFL has just released a statement in regards to the Kurt Tippett situation. I'm going to read from the piece of paper that I've just been handed. The AFL wishes to advise it has today begun the process of examining all records from the Adelaide Crows Football Club that may be relevant to its investigation under the AFL player rules into the contracting of Kurt Tippett in 2009 to cover the 2010 to 2012 AFL seasons. The AFL says it has no timeline to complete its investigation. During the trade period, the AFL advised Adelaide Crows and Tippett that any trade entered into furtherance of the agreement under investigation would not be accepted. So that's some new information that we're getting out of the AFL. Separately, as per the key dates timeline that has already been publicly advised to clubs and the media, the normal operation of the competition's draft process will continue through November into December. Now, pending the ongoing investigation that is now in place and subject to approval of the AFL, these rules will apply to player Tippett. The AFL has no further update to provide at this time. Your reaction to that, Damo?
Look, I think the key to that is the way I read that, and look, maybe it needs further analysis than to just read what we've got just in front of us right then as the AFL has released it, is that he can still nominate for the draft pending the sanctions that are almost certainly going to come his way by way of the AFL. But the key there is, and the AFL told clubs that this morning before the deadline of the trade happened today at 2 o'clock, that no trade could be done for Kurt Tippett today, which
couldn't
obviously linked with the deals and the side deals and the outside salary cap payments, which are now being investigated. But my take on that straight away, without analysing it, is that he can still nominate for the draft. All
right, we'll have to wait and see what happens next on the Kurt Tippett story, but it is one that we will continue to follow for you here at afl.com.au. All right, let's turn our attention to the Hawks now. This is seen as the first big coup of the draft period, the trade period, I should say. Brian Lake coming in. That is a big get for Hawthorn. Matt Spanger comes in from Sydney, and Jed Anderson comes in as well. He is the NT zone selection. They've lost young Murphy and Gillam.
Yeah, didn't want to lose young, but we're happy to help Murphy and Gillam find new homes, and really good effort to do that. The Lake securing is the big one there. It came at a surprise. They got him pretty well, mate. They didn't give up absolutely everything. They had to use a first-round draft pick, but they were able to get one or get another nice pick back in exchange as part of the transaction. I like what they've done. They felt that this was the area that cost them a premiership in 2012. Go and get a fullback who was available, certainly past his best, but in the Hawthorn team, he doesn't have to beat his best to actually get out of the season that they want him to get.
And this will refresh him as well, won't it, Brian? Like it's a big one.
Yeah, and the Bulldogs aren't all that unhappy about losing him, and he's very happy to get out of there. I'm giving Hawthorn for what they did, particularly on Brian Lake, a B+.
All right, that was one of the big stories of the trade period. As we turn our attention to the Ds, another big story of the trade period. As we look at their chart, you can just see they have been incredibly active. They've lost a stack of draft picks, but they've gained, as we know, Jesse Hogan through the mini draft. He can't play for another year. Chris Dawes from Collingwood, Shannon Burns from Geelong, David Roden from Port Adelaide, Cam Pedersen, and Don Barry is the NT draft selection. They also picked up Viney under the father-son rule, and that didn't have to go for as early a pick as a lot of people had thought might have happened, and there might have been something more to that as well. Yep. Talk us through your thoughts on this, Damo.
I just don't get it, Matt. I just been using the word scattergun approach to what they've done, and that's the way I see it. And I think as even today unfolded where deadline came and went, the way they look at it, their list is just broken. This is the player they got, Matty, Chris Dawes, but I reckon they gave up too much for him. I mean, they may argue, and others, and you may argue, that pick 20 is about right. To me, it's just not worth going after Chris Dawes with pick 20. I don't see how Shannon Burns, David Roden and Cam Pedersen are going to change what they're going to do. Really good people and really good football people, certainly in Burns and Roden's case. Don't know Pedersen well enough to give him that description, but
this
good
is Jesse
footy
Hogan
people.
we're looking at right now too, by the way.
And I just, they've actually lost. When I say lost, these players are contracted for next year, Matt. Jordan Gisberts, Carl Morton and Stefan Martin, all contracted for next year. Made decisions, but I just don't think what they brought in was big. And I reckon too, yes, it's going to be really good to have Jesse Hogan, but they've given up 2 first-round draft picks.
And have to wait for him.
And have to wait for him. 3 and 14 they've given up for this kid. 3 and 14, they can't use him next year.
I guess the big point and the big question, the counterpoint to what you're saying, is that what could they do? Melbourne had to do something during this trade and free agency period. They could not have another disastrous season. They had to try something.
Well, Matt, I don't know whether the decisions they've made here are actually going to improve them in any way, shape or form. I actually think the decisions they've made are going to actually haunt them even more than they've already been haunted. I mean, they are going to lose 4 players who are first round or pre number 12 selections in national drafts when Lucas Cook also comes off that list. No one wanted him. They've made some terrible decisions. I don't think the decisions they've made in this trade period is going to rectify anything they've done in the past.
So your forecast is that it's going to actually get worse for Melbourne out of this trade period?
What do they get out of David Roden, honestly? What do you think they get out of him? He's 29 when the season starts.
Well, he certainly adds some experience to their team, which they don't have.
I would have gone with the kids and just backed them in and maybe lessened expectations from a starting point that both Mark Neild and Neil Craig had.
You and I could argue about this all day long. What's your grade?
I've given them an E. It could have been an F.
It could have been an F.
Thought about it, an F.
I thought in the production meeting, I thought you were going to give them an F. I reckon Melbourne fans would be happy with an E.
And they had their bluff called too when the GWS and Gold Coast indicated they might take Jack Viney. They were never going to take Jack Viney, so they got caught up in that and then used 2 selections on Hogan.
All right, let's turn our attention to North Melbourne. Geordie Gisberts comes in from the D's. They've lost Hamish McIntosh, Aaron Edwards and Cam Pedersen. Their first pick in the draft is at pick 15.
Yeah, it is at 15. You have to mark them harshly, Matt. They had a good quality player like Ben Jacobs say he wants to join them. They couldn't get that deal done because they chose not to give up pick 15. I get that, but when Jacobs says he wants to go there, you don't get the deal done. You've got to mark them harshly. I've given them an E+. 3 players have gone out and only 1 in. I think it doesn't balance itself out.
All right, let's turn our attention now to Port Adelaide. Angus Monfries comes in to the power lineup from Essendon. They lose Daniel Pearce, as we know, and also Troy Chaplin. A few other players coming in there as well. What do you reckon?
Yeah, C+ is what I'm going to have when it comes up, Matty. For the reasons, I like Monfries. I think he's going to be a good player for them. Still got some good footy left. Picked up some players they targeted. They're not names, are they? When you look down Homch, Stevenson and Neil.
But they always have a reason to pick them up.
Exactly. I mean, Roden was delisted. Chaplin they lost as a free agent. Didn't want to lose him, but at the same time didn't match it. C+.
Still got pick 7 as well.
Yep.
Port Adelaide. To the Tigers, they were active pretty early, weren't they, in the free agency period? Troy Chaplin and Chris Knights. Aaron Edwards comes in. That trade confirmed today. They lost Angus Graham. I think a lot of people were surprised just about the terms of that departure.
Yeah.
The draft picks that they've got begin at number 9, which is a handy one to have.
Really like what they did. Did it even before it started, the Chaplin and Knights acquisitions. Those deals were done, Matty, unofficially before it started. They got them done and I liked it. Waited until today, the deadline day, to actually add Aaron Edwards as well. I like that too. I can see why they're doing it. And the loss of Angus Graham, well, it's not a loss because they chose not to play him this year anyway. Pretty much everything worked out the way they planned for it to and worked out, I believe, in a very positive way. And this is Chris Knights here. And if they can get him anywhere near the form he showed in 2009, I know that's a long time ago now, but if they can get him near that, he's going to be a really handy pick up for Richmond in 2013, and I'm going to give them a B+.
A B+ for the Tigers from Damo. I was waiting with bated breath for that one. Let's go to the Saints. They, of course, lost Brendan Goddard. Surely that has to mark them down. Tom Lee from Claremont, he is a promising contender. Tom Hickey from the Gold Coast as well. Pick 25 will be their first on draft day.
It's a disappointing trade period. I reckon they've paid overs for Hickey, giving up pick 12 as it was for him. I reckon that's overs. And I say it's disappointing because not so much for losing Brendan Goddard, as disappointing as that is. They'd resigned themselves to that happening for some time. It's disappointing because they couldn't get Mitch Brown. But they clearly clearly just chose not to use an early pick on him, which West Coast wanted them to do.
We're just having a little bit of a look at Tom Lee and what he might be able to offer the Saints, a player that they have targeted specifically from the waffle. He had a standout year, and as you can see, shows a lot of potential. Might add some depth to the Saints there.
Yeah, the good judges say this is a good pick, as much as it was giving up its first pick basically for him. But no Mitch Brown's going to hurt them to go into another season of footy without the monster that Scott Waters so desperately wanted down back. And as such, it's a D for the Saints in trade period.
All right, a D for the Saints. Looking forward to hearing the reaction from you Saints fans and from fans of all the clubs on Twitter after our program as well. Let's turn our attention to the Sydney Swans. And as you can see, if you've just joined us, there is no Kurt Tippett on that Sydney Swans page. And as a result, it was a relatively quiet trade period for them. The first draft pick that they have is pick 23.
It is. They've cleared some room, haven't they, with those omissions. Trent Dennis-Lane, Matt Spanger and Campbell Heath. They're players who aren't going to change what's going to happen to the Swans in 2013. They've still got room to go and get Tippett in the draft should they choose to do so. Disappointing though, because they couldn't get it done, and they probably, in hindsight, should have read the wind better. Somehow get a deal that was going to not cause alarm bells to ring on every single person involved with AFL footy, and done more to get Tippett across the line before it blew up in their face. Didn't get him. They could still get him though, but when it comes to the trade period, it has to be only, Matty, an E.
All right, an E for the Sydney Swans. To West Coast we go now. Sharrod Wellingham is their big get. They get Jamie Cripps from St Kilda today, Cale Morton from Melbourne. Lost Quinton Lynch, of course, and as we just talked about, the Mitch Brown deal never happened, so he stays there. Pick 46, their first on draft day. Yeah,
it's a bit low, giving up 17 as it was at the time. It's become 18 for Sharrod Wellingham. I liked it because they just made it clear he was worth getting. And it might have been slightly overs at the time, but in the end, it set the currency for what was to be the exchange of good players in this draft. And 17's about right. They didn't have a need for Quinton Lynch in the end, Matty, so that's not a massive loss. And Kobe Stevens couldn't get a game. I like the fact they've given Cale Morton a chance. I just got a feeling that he might actually work. And Jamie Cripps, we just don't know if he's going to do anything, but I think it's worth a risk. And Sharrod Wellingham alone makes their performance this past month a B+.
All right, a B+ for the Eagles. And that brings us to the Western Bulldogs. They pick up pick 22. Kobe Stevens comes in from the Eagles. Tom Young from Collingwood, as we know they lost Brian Lake. Pick 5 will be their first on draft day. That father-son pick later in the draft as well. They didn't lose much to get Hunter. So talk us through them.
Hey, I like the way they kept 5 and 6. There was probably some temptation at some stage to use it. Like the way they didn't. The loss of Lake is not going to hurt them too much. Stevens, unknown. Young, unknown. As such, I'm just going to make it a D.
And some late news from the Bulldogs as well. Justin Sherman to continue his career at another club. He wants to enter the pre-season draft. So that's a late piece of news. What do you make of that?
I'll make that code for we shopped him around during the trade period. No one wanted him, and he's now delisted.
Damo, it's been fun. It's been a busy year. There's been lots happening. Just before we go, your final thoughts on this trade and free agency period. Is a month too long?
I think it is. I think we could easily be condensed back to 3 weeks as a maximum, and maybe even look at decreasing even more than that. I think the deadline looming is the only thing that gets deals done. All
right. Well, you have been very busy. Damien Barrett, thank you so much. Well, now the countdown is on to the NAB AFL draft coming up on the Gold Coast on November 22. AFL.com.au, of course, has full coverage both online and on mobile, and you can continue the conversation from today using the Twitter handle @AFL. You can also find us on Facebook. That is it for now. I'm Matt Thompson. Thanks so much for watching.